Hi guys, welcome back to Magic Treehouse number 30, Hurricane Heroes in Texas by Mary Pope Osbourne. When we left in chapter 5, Jack and Annie had met Rose and her 1-year-old daughter Lily, and they were waiting for Rose's husband Lucas to return home. But in the meantime, the wind was howling and the water was rising, and the water had gotten so bad that it knocked down the door from its hinges, and water was now rushing into Rose's home. So we're going to start chapter 6, The Escape. "Upstairs," cried Rose, holding Lillian in her arms. She splashed across the parlor to the stairway. The parlor's like a living room. Jack grabbed his knapsack and hurried up the steps after Annie and Rose. Remember, knapsack is a backpack. When they reached the second-floor hallway, Jack heard glass shatter below. He looked down the stairs. The first-floor windows had broken. Water covered the parlor floor and was rising fast. A chunk of the upstairs ceiling crashed to the floor of the hallway. It barely missed them. "This way!" shouted Rose. "Be careful!" Still carrying Lily, Rose led Jack and Annie into a dark bedroom. She shut the door. "There," she said. Shutting out the hurricane was impossible, though. The windows in the bedroom were broken. Glass was everywhere. Wind and rainwater swirled in. Jagged pieces of roof shingles blew inside. "Get down! Cover your heads!" Rose called. Shielding Lily, Rose knelt between the wall and the bed. Jack and Annie crouched behind her. The baby buried her face against Rose. The house swayed back and forth. Jack felt water under his feet. It was seeping under the bedroom door. "We need to get higher," said Rose. "The roof." "How?" said Jack. "Follow me," said Rose, carrying Lily. She led Jack and Annie out of the bedroom. The rising seawater had reached the upstairs hall. Rain was pouring through a giant hole in the roof. "If we can just get up there, on the roof, we can get above the water," said Rose. "We can climb on furniture," said Annie. "Good," said Rose. "The dresser, the desk, the chair." Jack and Annie pushed a tall dresser under the hole in the ceiling. They hoisted a chair on top of the dresser. Then they pushed a blanket chest against the dresser to help them climb up. "Rose, you go first," said Jack. "Use the chest to get up onto the dresser. Then use the chair to get to the roof. Once you're safe, we'll hand Lily up." Annie took the baby from Rose. She whispered softly to her as Rose climbed from the chest onto the top of the dresser. "Careful," said Jack. Rose then climbed onto the chair. She grabbed the edge of the torn roof and hauled herself up. "Now, Lily," she called to Jack and Annie. Jack climbed up on the chest, then the dresser. Then he stood up on the chair and reached down as Annie held the baby up to him. The baby was heavier than Jack had expected. He steadied himself on the chair, then lifted Lily up toward Rose. Jack held the baby as high as he could. Rose grabbed Lily and pulled her onto the roof. "You go next," Jack said to Annie. He stepped off the chair. Annie climbed onto the dresser. Jack held the chair steady as she pulled herself up onto the roof. Jack followed. He stood on the chair and peered above the roof. The wind and rain pounded him. He felt the chair shaking. The dresser shook too. The whole house was shaking. There they are, going up in the hole. With no time to think, Jack gripped the edge of the broken roof and pulled himself up. He joined the others on the wind-blown, soggy rooftop. Battered by wind and rain, they all crouched around the baby. They held each other tightly. The house shook beneath them. "How can we get to high ground?" Jack shouted. "I don't know," said Rose. Jack looked around. In the last light of early evening, all of Galveston seemed covered by water. Suddenly there was a loud crack. The house was sliding off its pillars. It was splitting in two. Rose cried out. Jack and Annie clung more tightly to her and Lily. There were more loud cracking sounds. Half of the house crumbled into the churning sea waters. The roof over the other half broke completely free of the house, with all of them on it. "Hang on!" cried Annie. Jack and Annie held on to Rose and Lily as the wind pushed the roof onto the floodwaters. Lily let out a wail. Rose started singing. Her voice was surprisingly strong. Annie began singing along. "Hush, little baby, don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird." As their voices rose above the wind, Jack saw crumbling buildings. He saw people floating on mattresses, on boards, and even in washtubs. Jack heard cries of "Help!" from survivors on rooftops. He saw others hanging on to tree limbs. He wished he and Annie could help everyone, but there was no way to steer the roof raft. Every time the wind shifted, the direction of the waves shifted with it. The rooftop kept turning and moving with the storm waters. Lily finally fell asleep. Rose and Annie stopped singing. "Where are we?" asked Annie. Rose looked around in the dim lights. She gasped. "The Gulf! I think we're heading toward the Gulf!" she cried. "The Gulf!" said Jack. "You mean we might end up in the ocean?" "Oh no," said Annie. But the wind shifted again. The water current changed. The roof spun around and began moving in another direction. Jack didn't know what to do, except hang on to the others. "Are you both all right?" Rose asked. "I'm good," said Jack. "Me too," said Annie. "Are you okay, Rose?" "I don't know," she said. "I can't figure out what to do." "There's nothing we can do," said Annie. "We have to wait for it all to end." "I think you're right, Annie," said Rose. Adrift on the black floodwaters, the roof raft rose and fell with the waves. Storm, wreckage crashed against it, but the current kept pushing the raft through the wreckage. Jack and Annie held on tightly to Rose as she cradled the baby. Drifting through the storm, they all rocked back and forth together. After a while, Jack gave in to his tiredness. His head nodded. His eyes started to close. So that was the end of chapter 6. I wonder what's going to happen next. Right now, they're just floating around in the waves on the roof of Rose's former house. So we'll see what happens next time. See ya.